Welcome back to It Starts Now, the Happy Hour of Finance and Business. My name is Stanley, and I have a special guest for today's show. My guy Juan stopped by. Juan Perez. Perez is actually in marketing, co-founder of Hybrid Media.
Yep.
It's interesting because I was doing the research and diving in, and I noticed that it said multicultural marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what is that? Like, can you break it down? But before we do that, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure.
Let the people know your title, what is it that you do,
Sure.
and what got you to this point?
What got me to this point? Wow, that's a loaded question. So I'm the CEO of Hybrid Media, also the managing partner of Paramore LLC. We'll talk a little bit more about what that is, but essentially that's our holding company. So what got us to this point? It's been a long journey.
Yeah,
it's been a long journey. I feel like I've always been an entrepreneur, but Hybrid itself has gone through many different phases.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, before hybrid electric vehicles were even a thing, hybrid existed. Hybrid media existed. So, a lot of people think that we have some sort of relationship to hybrid vehicles. It's
not the case.
Not the case. Right. It was really the name came about because we were in entertainment at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And we were the formulation of two organizations at that point, and a hybrid is two things kind of coming together. So that's where the name came from.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
And the multicultural marketing, like, break that down.
Yeah. So when we first started out, we were a billboard company. So we contracted and sold, resold ads on billboards, out what we would call outdoor advertising or out of home. And the interesting thing was we weren't unique.
Why is that?
It was a dime a dozen.
Oh, okay.
There was a million guys out there, selling, billboards, ads in particular, right?
Mm-hmm.
My background is in radio. My business partner's background is in sales, comes from Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm.
And through my relationships in radio, and particularly working at CBS at the time cornered the market in out of home or outdoor advertising. They've since sold off pieces of that as the industry has changed.
Mm-hmm.
But we essentially wanted. I saw the potential in that.
Okay.
And essentially wanted to get a piece of the pie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we, sold these ads, we realized that people were actually coming to us not necessarily for what we were selling, but who we were and who we knew.
Oh.
So, especially here in New York City, areas like this, Southeast Queens, areas, ethnic enclaves in South Florida, Chicago. We realized that a lot of marketers were really trying to understand those marketplaces.
Right.
And they might buy an ad, but that was their invitation or their ticket to have a conversation with us, to sort of pick our brains about the marketplace. One of the areas that we were just has really taken us to, the company leaps and bounds is the Caribbean marketplace.
Did you stumble into that, or that's something that you guys taught?
I mean, we're I'm a second generation Dominican American. My mother's family's from Barbados. My dad's family's from DR, and my business partner, he's from Jamaica. I think it's kind of ingrained in New Yorkers, especially Black New Yorkers, that there's some level of a connection to the Caribbean in some way, shape, or form. we got stuck in the middle passage somehow.
Yeah.
But I think the what we realized, and this is one of the things that a lot of the marketers that we work with didn't realize, was that Caribbean consumers and traditional Black consumers buy very differently.
How so?
Well, the generational divides. So, the first generation immigrant who comes to this country very much keeps and tries to hold the traditions of quote unquote back home. And many of those traditions aren't necessarily traditions that are upheld here. And, not banking at a traditional bank, holding money under the mattress.
Yeah. So the cliche is true.
There's a lot of cliches, but I think the cliches oftentimes are formulate assumptions about an industry, or a marketplace that you need to base your marketing around, right? Trends, right? And the interesting thing is that the second generation, like myself, second generation Dominican, this kind of goes the complete opposite.
Yeah.
It tries to assimilate as much as possible.
Is it because you're Americanized?
Trying to be less like our parents, and if you actually look at it, and many of the, if you dive into the roots of hip hop, the generational divide of, those that came from that are part of the diaspora,
right,
really drove that rebellious attitude,
right?
Trying to be different from our parents and what they listened to and what they wore and what they ate and the way that they moved, drove what was part of the hip hop generation. So,
do you think that we're a byproduct of a lot as we get older? Because I still see people in their 40s still got the hip hop ways, versus back in the days when people used to turn around 35, you see them conforming more into like our parents, style changes, and they let go of some of that youthism and more into like adulthood. Yeah. But where now, like, we're growing up with hip hop, so I think that do you think we're a byproduct of it as we get older? Guys still wanna, and ladies still wanna be fresh, still wanna.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's generations now, multiple generations of Black Americans that don't know an America without hip hop. I think it's an interesting question because I think that I remember a time when hip hop was sort of like developing, right? And I think there's a lot of young people that they just grew up in it. There's professionals that never actually heard Biggie, on the radio.
True. And you have that experience.
Right.
We're gonna touch back on multicultural thing back in the Caribbean island, but you also worked for Hot 97 or something like that, right?
Yeah, and I worked at Hot 97 a really interesting time. Matter of fact, I remember, you ever seen the movie Brown Sugar?
Yes.
All right.
That's a classic.
Yes.
All right. For the hood, though.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a hood movie, but that's around the time that I was working there.
Okay.
And starring Buck Wild, had at that time overthrown Howard Stern for the first time in his career, and that's about the time that Howard Stern bolted for satellite radio. As a result, so I was a radio head,
right,
and really into sort of all the different components of radio, but to see how the culture was driven by not just the music,
right,
but like the DJs, the record companies. At that time, it was like the what do you call those? The groups that the DJs had, they had formulated these conglomerates like the Big Dog Pit Bulls.
Oh
and,
yeah.
So
Was it around the time that Biggie and them were coming up?
That was after, because
Okay.
I left Hot in 2002.
Mhm.
I know it sounds like a long time ago, but I left Hot in 2002 after 9/11.
Okay.
But right before 9/11 was, in my opinion, probably the height of, because they, at that time they were owned by MS Communications, and MS owned not only Hot 97 but Kiss FM, and CD 101.9. And those were the three, top radio stations in there, for their genre. So just kind of seeing how the music not only influenced, and that was the first time I recognized that hip hop was not just about the music. It was not just about the culture, but it was about the business as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what really made me pay more attention, sit up and pay more attention to our people. And when I say cultural, it's not just about, the traditional divides that we may have, ethnic or racial divides, but also the cultural divides that sort of drive, who we are and what we're all about.
Did it change the landscape for the better, or do you think it changed the landscape in a sense where it created division?
See, I think the only way that you can appropriately answer that question, I have the advantage of hindsight, right? And I think in the moment, we don't have that advantage. Like right now, everybody's going to say, oh, 2000 and 2021, 2020 were the worst years ever, right?
Right.
The truth of the matter is, it changed things. And there's going to be there have been some amazing innovations that come out of, people losing jobs, people making a pivot in their focus as far as their business is concerned. I know for a fact that, Black Americans have trended heavily over indexing in learning about finance.
Yeah.
Investing in the market. It's not something we ever did before.
No.
And even a focus on that has never been something that has been sexy, as it relates to our people. So, there's a lot of trends that, generally speaking, you'll have to 5-10 years from now, we can answer that. As far as, looking back at that era and that time, I think everything, most transitional periods are for the better, right? I don't think that that period of time where the artist, and I mean the artists in terms of all of the artists, not just the music artists, but the DJs, the club owners, even the visual artists had taken control of the culture. At that time they were talking about 360, these 360 contracts that they were signing with record labels. We see a lot more of that now.
I think that's probably the norm right now.
Correct. Whereas the big conglomerates were in charge of things. They controlled everything. And it kind of driven at the time had driven this concept of decentralization.
Right.
And allowing the user that control. Even at that time, there may have been like sort of a focus on, remember Napster?
Right.
And being able to download music and sort of control how you listen to music. Before that, it was always controlled by, this is the album. You got to listen to it in this sequential order. And, that's not how we consume music anymore.
No. Especially, I don't know. I think the more control that I have of my playlist, the less of my playlist becomes attractive.
Right.
And the reason I say that, because I don't like listening to the radio, but I find myself like on a Friday night or something, I'll turn on the radio because I want to hear a different mixture. right? We want to hear the DJs really that skillful, really display their skills, right? And then play multiple tracks, even if it's old tracks, new tracks, but the blending is a lot more proficient than something I would play on my playlist, right? But I agree that everything innovated from there, and then we're still growing, right? There's still a lot of room for more innovation to come. But I just want to get your point of view from a marketing standpoint, right? How did that made you say, you know, I'm gonna go into this direction? Like this is where I see it's going, and this is where I want to pioneer towards.
It's a really interesting question. I consider myself an entrepreneur. There's a lot of people who consider themselves an entrepreneur. I know that I'm an entrepreneur. I think I've always been that way. You know, my first business was in the outside of DC when I moved there for high school, uh, cutting grass, right? And you know, I saw all these lawns out there because I'm a Brooklyn kid, and I moved out there for high school, and I said, "Man, people got lawns out here. Who cuts them?" You know, and then not just who cuts them, who cuts the shrubs, and puts out the mulch and all that other stuff. So, and at that time, I saw especially like South Americans and Mexican Americans had really jumped into that, and made a little way for themselves. I said, I could do this, and I think I have a community feel about me where I can, talk up these white folks out there and make a little bit of money. So I did that for a while and recognized that I had a spirit for it. And, I think us as a people, Black and brown people have a entrepreneurial spirit ingrained within us. The challenge is not fostered. It's not cultivated. One of the things that I notice all the time, I don't know why we've gotten into hip hop, that the hip hop discussion, but it's interesting because, I love trains, and whenever I can, I'll ride the New York City subways, right? But one of the things you see on the subways all the time is the kid who asks you, "Hey, I'm selling candy, trying to stay off the streets. I'm not selling it for my basketball team." And then that's a pitch, right? That's a marketing pitch, right? And they got it down pat. They probably got it from their buddy. But, I always keep $2 in my pocket.
Just for them.
Just for them. And because I want to talk to them.
Right.
And it's not about, I usually get the little the fruit snacks. That's my thing. Right? But I want to talk to them, see what their motivation is, because far too often that's entrepreneurship.
Yeah. That's a startup.
Yeah, it's a startup. They've gotten their capital investment, right? They went and they bought their boxes. They tape them together because that's what they do, right? They tape them so it's one cohesive unit. And they look at what they diversify. All right, well, I know that on a 2 train I might get some additional peanut clients. They diversify the portfolio a little bit of what they're offering, right? And then what they do is they look at their profits,
right?
And then they decide, they make a decision about what they're going to do with those profits. Are they going to reinvest, or are they going to spend it? And how much are they spending, and how much are they reinvesting?
That's so interesting because I never looked at it that way. Right. And it is teaching them even how to deal with wholesaling. Right. Because now they got to go, probably go to BJ's, Costco, something like that. Right. And then they buy it wholesale, sell it retail, and like you said, have diversity within their products. And then you go out there and then you have to make that pitch. So I never looked at it that way. That's crazy because it is the startup. It is learning business 101 from the start. But those are the same principles that will carry you along because those are the same principles that apply to running a big company.
Yep. And the thing is, I mean, historically in this country, we're always talking about the lemonade stand.
Right.
That's our lemonade stand. That is our lemonade stand. And But the issue is that now they see that little bit of money that they are making and they have to make that decision. Unfortunately, the only entrepreneurs in our communities historically have been the drug dealers and the rappers
that we've seen.
Oh, yeah. Right. That, that have taken the time to talk to those young men. And far too often they fall victim to the streets.
Right.
And,
because that's the only option that they see.
That they're familiar with. They're familiar with. And I think that's one of the benefits of this pandemic. Especially in the lockdown period, we had an opportunity to focus on some different things. We've seen, an influx of people looking at YouTube and various different digital means to learn more. Have invested in their own educational paths outside of the traditional educational paths, which I think is important. And I think our young people have more access than they did in the past, even by having to now be home learning.
I think that, and I said this before, YouTube changed the landscape where before you had to get hired to get some skill sets.
Correct.
And now you can learn these skills from home and on your laptop, on your phone, anywhere you can get the streaming service and learn these skills and then go out and get contracted.
Right.
So I think YouTube has changed the landscape, and you're right. It is giving a lot of opportunities for individuals to really see what works for them.
Right.
Whereas before that, I had to go to school, get a job, get some experience, learn some things, and then I can decide where I want to go because now I got something underneath my belt. Whereas now they can play with different things. You can learn as multiple things as possible within the realm of whatever your capability, and then go out there and get contracted for things and I think it is a great thing, but they also expose school.
Yes.
Yes. It exposed that. It leaves you open that why am I paying so much to go learn something that I can actually learn at home for free?
But I think also it's about disruption, right? It's disrupting the educational model. And here's the thing is, historical models, if you're not looking for those disruptors, then you're not doing your job. Whether it's the music industry, like we talked about, whether it's newspapers and media, if it's religion, how religion is being even consumed these days. There's so many, market disruptors out there, and it's good. It's innovative. A lot of people talk about, advertising. It used to be, and a lot of people don't realize the disruption in marketing and advertising, right? It used to be that I didn't want to give people my information. Remember, it was like, why am I filling out these forms? They're taking I need to stay off the grid, right? But now with things like Google and Apple, Amazon, think about how much data exists. My ability to stay off the grid, if you will, is impossible.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not possible. It's about how much information am I willing to give relative to how much information you really need on me, right? So everybody's seen this happen, right? You're scrolling through Instagram and you see, I was just talking about this. How is this thing popping up here on my
algorithm?
And it's all about the algorithm. And there's some debate. It's controversial about cooking and even in the EU they've cracked down on a lot of that.
Sure.
But there's also debate about how many times have we actually purchased because of the algorithm. I've found some really interesting products because of the algorithm.
True.
Things that I wanted.
But is it that you're being manipulated to buy it? That's the thing. It's like, I agree. is one thing if I came across something that I wanted versus that the algorithm is saying, no, I think based off of this, you should get this and you should want this. And now I'm searching. Is it making me a consumer by choice, or is it making me a consumer by influence?
I think I would look at it differently.
Okay.
I think it's about the consumer. And I think far too often the consumer plays the victim.
Break it
and down. The marketing has existed for generations, from the dawn of time, right? It's about power and influence. How can I've always said that one of my definitions of what marketing is the high art of getting people to separate from their money. That's all it is.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's about what is that process? How quickly does that process take? And whether or not you're going to choose me or my competitor. But we earn money, not to save it, to spend it at some point.
Right.
And sometimes a competitor can be, a direct competitor, or it can be something else. Do I choose to buy this house, or do I choose to go on vacation? That's a decision I make.
Right.
And I got to be responsible for those decisions.
Right.
Whether they're right or wrong, how I wind up.
Right.
Do I buy the car?
Right.
Or
do I save?
Exactly.
Right.
So those are decisions that the consumer makes. Helping us to make more informed decisions, I think, is what marketing is all about. And especially from a digital perspective. And this really gets into what, who I am and what our company is all about, is utilizing that data and trying to do so in a responsible way, in a way that doesn't take advantage of our communities. One of our clients, now called Metro by T-Mobile, but at the time was called Metro PCS, love them because they always recognized who they were. And they were never delusional about who they were. They were the value, carrier.
Right.
They, before they got bought by T-Mobile, Metro PCS was the value carrier, right? And I don't say cheap. It is about what value can we provide to our, customers in a way that is understandable. $40 flat, you get your phone.
Right.
Your service. You ain't got to worry about all the tax fees and all that is rolled right up in it. Simplify it. Now, it's not for everybody.
No.
But for a certain segment of the population, that was for them.
Especially if you're a young kid going to school. Easy. And if I'm a parent and I want to give a child a phone, that's probably the most available.
And what is important to those, it's the phone.
Right.
It's not about, hey, look, I might get a couple phone calls drop. But you understand
but you have access to a phone.
I got access to a phone. I got access to one of the newer phones, the glitzier phones, and I don't need to now pay for a phone, every 2 years. They built that into the contract, and the way that the phone models have changed a little bit in recent years. But I really learned a lot. From my time with them, as Metro PCS, now owned by, Metro by T-Mobile, about how a national company approaches our marketplace. And they wanted to learn. They said, look, I don't understand why our stores, and they get real granular in terms of really talking about New York, right? I don't understand why our stores that are south of Eastern Parkway do not do well. But our stores that are north of Eastern Parkway do well when we market to African Americans. But I can explain that to you very easily, because there are no African Americans south of Eastern Parkway. They're Caribbean Americans, and they consume differently. Well, what do you mean? They look all the same. That's the mistake.
Right. Assuming that everyone is the same.
Exactly. And that education was the value that we provide, them and helping them to understand their customer and how they approach their customer. So we did things like, centered around Carnival and things centered around the Caribbean American experience that made a lot more sense than, what they thought was an African American consumer. And yes, there is some mixing there, right? I don't want to act like the two groups are totally mutually exclusive of one another, but I think that's what marketing is about: is making some assumptions based on the majority of a population.
That's interesting. And I always thought Metro PCS was like a Caribbean thing.
Right.
And now that you broke it down, that you guys help educate them in pursuing a different target audience. And I think that's great that you show them the differences. But at the end of the day, they were still targeting us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think they were also giving back to, and that's where the value proposition came into play, was understanding who their marketplace was. And is, and understanding that they can't be apart from the community. They need to be a part of the community. And that's where, especially in the early days of Barclays Center, they were a major sponsor, understanding that this was a community that we wanted to be a part of, and they invested in the community. It's funny because a lot of other organizations looked at that model. If you look at what is it? I'm trying to think of what that gym is called. Not Planet Fitness, but the other one.
Crunch?
No.
24?
No, I'm forgetting.
Okay.
But Blink. Yes, Blink
Okay.
Fitness, right? So Blink Fitness, if you look at Blink Fitness, Blink Fitness very much follows the same model. As a matter of fact, next time you look at Blink Fitness, and then look, if you walk within a block radius, you will always find a Metro PCS or Metro by T-Mobile store. They use their market research to open up their locations. I know that for a fact. Because they were going after the same audience.
Makes sense now.
And at the time, and Blink Fitness is actually a subsidiary of Equinox. So Equinox is the much more high-end brand.
Yeah, that's
right?
a high-end brand.
That's a highest end brand.
Yeah,
right?
it was like $800 a month or something
crazy.
Yeah, it was
crazy. I don't have money for Equinox, but Blink was going after, and matter of fact, that's why Blink approached us. They were like, "Yo, what is your strategy?
Right.
We want the playbook." And it wasn't about, so it became very evident to us that, whoa, you all are targeting the very same communities. And then I would look at their maps, overlay them with the maps that we had for at that time, Metro PCS. I was like, you're opening up stores all within, a couple block radius of all of our locations.
That's interesting because I don't remember if it was, I forgot the name of it, but there were a few companies that follow Walmart. Wherever Walmart opens up, they open up as well too. And I thought it was a coincidence, but now that you're pointing it out, that people do follow certain companies' model or roadmaps in order for them to get established.
Why not? If you're going after the same audience, and
it's different. It's one thing if you're going after the same audience, but separate products. They're different products. But when you're following a trend with the same product, it doesn't make sense because you're getting probably like a margin of that share because they already have it already. They're established.
And there is another client that I have that I won't mention that actually saw the market share being dwindled by Metro by T-Mobile. Had to offset that. Because it's all market share game,
right?
At the point cell phones are saturated, right?
Right.
Everyone has one.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what is the market share? How many of, what percentage of the population are on my carrier?
Right.
That's the game these days. Can I get you to switch from your current carrier to my carrier? I'm not selling anybody,
Right.
there aren't any net new cell phone
No.
customers.
But most of these are franchise or no?
So the way their models are, it's similar to how they're independent retailers.
Mm-hmm.
That buy into. It used to be like a lot of those pager stores back in the day that used to sell pagers and like all that kind of stuff. They turned into cell phone stores, right? And they would carry a couple different carriers. Now the cell phone providers don't want them to do that. They want them to exclusively commit to one of their carriers.
Yeah. Okay.
So a lot of the stores, if you notice, will say authorized retailer underneath the name. So that's sort of the model. And then they have core stores. They have the stores that are, Verizon, AT&T, Metro by T-Mobile, AT&T,
yeah. And you had AT&T at one point, right?
Yes.
As a client.
AT&T is actually a current client. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And, they, the interesting thing with AT&T is, AT&T is not just a Fortune 500 company. They're a Fortune 10 company.
Mm.
They're
big.
They're huge.
Right.
Huge. But, and this kind of goes into who we are today is, at our core, what hybrid media is, right? Is we focus on three different areas.
Mm-hmm.
We focus on alignment, enablement, and measurement.
Okay.
Well, I thought pick up from there. That sound, the heat is coming up, so you're gonna hear that clinking. So I'm gonna give it like 30 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, that's the radiator, right?
Yeah. Old school.
At least you know it's working.
That's a good point right there.
At least you know it's working. It's better
How's
than
the
the
drink?
alternative.
You want some more? Yeah, absolutely. Where you at, brother?
This is incredible stuff that you guys are talking about. Right?
Thank you.
It's
I
the black
appreciate it.
label. John.
Hey, listen, I put out the best for you, brother. So,
Bro, you told me that earlier.
of course I'm gonna say that. Let me tell you. I'm afraid to pour the wine into this.
A wine glass?
Yeah, it's like it's not kosher.
Man, listen.
Sorry. No, I'm gonna say it. It broke.
I'm a red Solo cup guy. Wine in the red Solo cup, it tastes the same.
Yeah, that's true.
You shake it around a little bit, get the what they call it, the tannins.
The tannin,
yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard to spin it with this one.
Oh yeah,
you're like, it's all right though. All right, so you were saying 3 parts.
Yeah. So, it's you talked about the journey, right? And it's been a long journey. So I won't get, because we could be here for years, talking about this journey. But again, Hybrid started out as an entertainment company. We were actually called Hybrid Entertainment at one point. And Hybrid Entertainment started when we were in college, matter of fact. So I graduated from West Virginia University in 2001.
Right.
And
that's the back one. It comes in from 2 separate sides.
Yeah. So I graduated from West Virginia in 2001. And at the time, a bunch of friends of ours, we were working on some music projects, and essentially we started doing mixtapes, and which were very, very popular at the time. And the idea and the concept was that we would sell sponsorships on these mixtapes. Now, I have to take you back to 2001.
Right.
Because even in the movie we talked about, Brown Sugar, it was this concept of selling out.
Yeah.
Remember what was it? The Dalmatians? They sold out, right? So corporate sponsorship and music and art were two totally separate worlds. And if you tried to get into the same world,
right,
you a sellout, bro. You remember that, right?
I remember that. But
now how it's everybody. If you're not taking advantage of the partnerships, from a corporate perspective, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And
people need to kind of make sure that they always keep that in, sort of historical, references in foremost in their mind.
Right.
So what we did is the very first mixtape that we sold was what we called the Breakfast Sampler of Champions.
What's that based off of?
Breakfast of Champions.
Okay. Bring it home for me.
So General Mills at the time was, again, looking to target certain, demographic groups, and they, this hip hop thing. It's like we want to be involved, right? And we were just looking to we had like a whole factory in the house. We had CD burners and all kinds of stuff. So we're like, we just need you to cover costs. And it was a few $1,000s they covered costs. And we said, hey, we'll do the graphics, make it look like, because at that time, remember, every year they would have a Breakfast of Champions cover person.
Right.
The athlete of the year was on.
I remember now.
You remember, right?
Yeah. So
we took that and we put ourselves on the cover of this mixtape and called it the Breakfast Sampler of Champions, which was a sample of, the music that we were putting out. And we brought other artists on, et cetera, right? Most people don't really know this about me, by the way.
The rap career, or it's a drink.
It's a drink. So I never, I was never an MC myself. I was more into production. But, it was the business of it that I really enjoyed.
That's what attracted you.
Yeah, it was the business of it. And, I got off track before, but like I've always said, and I tell people this all the time, yes, I am people say, oh, you're the expert. Look, in this day and age, if you're an expert at anything, it means you're not learning.
Say that again.
If you're an expert at anything, it means you're not learning.
Yeah.
I always call myself a professional.
Yeah, you stop your growth.
You stop your growth. Right. And I'm always looking to learn, because our industry, like most industries, is still growing, and technology and innovations are coming in daily. And if I don't take, stock in that and consistently make sure that me and my team are staying abreast of what the new innovations are in our industry and making sure that we're doing right by our clients, then, we're going to fall behind.
Right.
And that's where that market disruption and what we were talking about earlier really plays an important part, right? So from making, mixtapes and understanding that we had an opportunity to sell, we thought about, hey, what if we did, created songs or tracks for these corporate, companies. They wanted nothing to do with that, and we realized part of it was because hip hop, especially at that time, was all about sampling.
That was a big thing.
It was a big thing, right?
Pop, that was made Puff.
Made Puff, right? But the thing was that the samples that a lot of these artists were taking were from music that was owned by artists that had long, gotten out of the industry. Didn't have the capital to be able to hire the lawyers to sue this industry. Plus, it wasn't worth the time.
Right.
So what we did was we started a different company because we wanted to keep all of our samples, that we had in the music safeguarded from what we were now going after as a marketing and advertising company. And that's when we started Hybrid Outdoor. So
did you pivot at that point?
It was absolutely a pivot. I'll tell you
Okay.
exactly when that pivot. I can pinpoint the day.
Okay.
It was November 4th, 2004. And you may not know that date, but if I tell you what happened that night, it was the election of George Bush II night.
Why was that so important?
Because at the time, George Bush was our Trump.
There's some truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that.
And again,
because we did view it.
We viewed it very much the same way.
Yeah.
Very much the same way. And we were like, damn, this is going to be another 4 years of this. Because it was inevitable at that point. It was just like, this is what's going to happen. There was no way that we were, it was a foregone conclusion.
Right.
And I remember me and my buddies were sitting in the basement and saying, hey, what are we going to do? And we strategized. And it was a strategy session. We probably had a few drinks, maybe some weed. I don't know. I don't remember.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. But in the basement in Southeast Queens in Rosedale. And we came up with some ideas. And one of the ideas that we had at that time, I was still working. I had just left. No, I was still working. Yeah, I was still working as in radio, but I was over at CBS working for actually for Don Imus and WFAN. And we were saying, hey, we need to actually find a revenue source to fund our music projects.
Right.
And that's where the hybrid outdoor came into play. Because I was working at CBS had CBS Outdoor. They owned all of New York City subway, bus, Long Island Railroad, Metro North advertising. Right. And I thought, hey, we could sell ads on trains. And they're like, no, you can't do that. CBS owns that.
So they got a like conglomerate or monopoly.
They had a monopoly.
Yeah.
They had a monopoly and a contract. I think at that time it was 5-year contracts. Where they were the exclusive holder of that property. So if you wanted to buy ads, you had to go through them.
Right.
I didn't understand that at the time.
Right.
But I worked at that time for CBS, not CBS Outdoor, but CBS Radio.
Right.
Same corporation, Viacom. It was all the same stuff at the time. It's been decentralized since. But I said, well, what can we sell? And this is when, maybe it was the weed, maybe it was, and I don't smoke, but,
where the connection was made.
It was where the connection was made, where we said, well, how can we, help our people, help ourselves, and make money, right? And we said, well, what is there out there to sell, like the, New York City transit system? Got it. Dollar Vans. So that's where we got our start as a marketing company. Is we became the exclusive
rights for Dollar Van promotion
industry.
That's dope.
So again, remember I had a background in radio, working at Hot 97. I had a lot of connections and working with, because at that time it was about, Summer Jam. They would wrap a million, trucks and cars and things like that. So I had a lot of connections in that. So I said, what if we wrap Dollar Vans with our clients' messaging? I don't know. It's never been done before. So we went out there and did it. And our first client, never forget, was a company, Royal Healthcare. And they, at that time, were a no and low cost healthcare company that was looking to target people in, in New York City. And healthcare, they provided healthcare services, but insurance. So to people who had, were low income or no income. And I can remember our first check that came in. I was like, whoa, $10,000. Look at this. All right, what are we gonna do with this? Again, that conversation that I had with the, about the kids, and they were like, yo, let's divvy it up. Nah, we're gonna reinvest this in the business. And it was probably one of the smartest decisions we made. You know, we purchased some equipment, like some, you know, some printers. I still have the shredder that we purchased. Still works. You know, and, you know, reinvested it in the company. And we went after some other companies. One of our early clients was actually Universal Circus. What would be some of the other early clients? Oh, a great story. Was actually Air Jamaica.
We got Air Jamaica as well.
Yes. So Air Jamaica doesn't exist anymore. Most people don't recognize that. Air Jamaica was actually at that time its own individual airline. It was the national airline for Jamaica. Right? Jamaicans took pride in that. You know, you rode on the plane, had the flag, you know, they loved the flag. Loved the flag, right? Like I said, my business partner is Jamaican. But, you know, tough economic times necessitated that Air Jamaica needed to be sold. So it was sold to a company at that time called BWI. And BWI, which is BWIA, right, was a Trini company. And, you know, for people who live here in New York City, you know that Trinis and Jamaicans don't generally mix like that. You know, don't get along too tough.
Rough edges.
You know, so when it was announced that BWI was going to be purchasing Air Jamaica, it was like, oh, they're doing this on purpose.
So it became like a little tussle.
Became a tussle. But they didn't know that BWI was going to actually rebrand as what is now known as Caribbean Airlines. So for a long time, Jamaicans would not ride with Caribbean Airlines. They just wouldn't do it. They would fly at that time. American Airlines also flew to Jamaica. They would actually pay more money
than to ride a Caribbean airline.
Correct. And, you know, that's the unfortunate thing about how our people look at each other. As a matter of fact, it was because of discussions that we had and feedback that we got from the community. And this is what really sold us on that, the fact that we were on the right path as it related to multicultural marketing, was that data, that information, those anecdotal stories that because they could see it in the data. People are not flying to Jamaica. Why aren't these flights filling up? And the only people who were flying were white folks. You know, the One Love commercials. That was the only people who were flying, right? So what they actually did was they broke out the Air Jamaica brand separately.
Oh, so they divided.
They brought it back.
But who brought it back?
Caribbean Airlines. Still owned by Caribbean Airlines.
All right.
But it was now a subsidiary or a division of. It was all about the title. Brand of. Well, I'm glad that you brought up timing. Because if you're going to the Caribbean, what airline are you flying? Think about it.
All right. I'm gonna go we got to think about the time too, because now I probably would fly like a Delta or American Airlines, but I guess if I'm a Caribbean base, I'm gonna take Caribbean Airlines.
Okay. JetBlue.
Really?
JetBlue started flying to the Caribbean because they saw an opportunity. People started. They were doing direct flights from New York at that time. Atlanta, and certain enclaves where there were Caribbean folks directly to the Caribbean. And honestly, that was a huge win for JetBlue.
Yeah, especially if they privately owned. So they really scaled by jumping on that opportunity.
Correct. And, you know, during that time where Caribbean Airlines couldn't figure it out, you know, they took advantage of that. Another example of that would be, remember there was, and it still exists to this day, but there was this huge move to coconut water.
Yeah.
You remember?
I remember.
And it was all of these companies that came out with these little coconut water brands, coconut and pineapple, coconut and this, coconut and that, you know. But there were all these, like, you know, Grace Kennedy, which was, you know, the number one, you know, it's like the craft, if you will, of the Caribbean, had always had coconut water, but they never marketed it. They only marketed it to the diaspora. They marketed it to people like us. They never thought that the general population, white folks, would actually purchase
coconut
water.
Yeah.
So when this craze hit, they were not prepared for the market disruption. And they never took advantage of it.
Because they scale too quickly. And that can hurt a lot of people too when things move too fast and you're not prepared.
Not prepared. You need to be not thinking about today. You need to be thinking about tomorrow. So I know we started this particular discussion talking about 3 basic tenets, right? And that I see in what I call a revenue operation, RevOps, right? Is there's 3 tenets. You have marketing, you have sales, and you have service, right? And it was always thought that the sales model was what you would look at as like a funnel, right? You pour leads into the top of the funnel. Some of the leads won't convert into sales. And then at the bottom of the funnel is an output, which is a customer, right? But what happens with that customer? Well, the customer doesn't always stay a customer. At some point, they may need to buy again, right? Which means that you need to put them back into the top of it. Now, they may filter down a lot quicker because they're familiar with your service. But if your service operation sucks, they're going to go someplace else. So we started to think about it not anymore as a funnel, but a flywheel. And if you know that, like a pinwheel, one of those pinwheel things, right? The pinwheel, you put it on your lawn, right? And the wind would blow and it would start to spin, right? And if you notice, as it would start to spin, it would spin faster, and faster, right? What would slow it down would be what we refer to as friction, right? Friction is, you know, I had a minor in physics, right? So friction is what slows things down. It's the force against something that'll slow it down. Far too often, we put, especially businesses of color, put friction in our process. We put barriers to allowing our customers to buy something. Intentionally
or just subconsciously, it just happens?
It happens.
Okay.
You know, I don't want people to buy, you know, that. I know who my customer is. You know,
but everybody should be a customer because you should be willing to onboard everybody.
You should be willing to. You should target certain individuals, but allow everyone the access to buy. So, for instance, one of the barriers to entry for the dollar van industry, what is it? They don't accept credit cards.
That's how you go around that.
You know, so but historically they've never grown because they didn't grow as how, you know,
the times change.
I mean, not only credit cards, but we into Bitcoin at this point. You know, and cryptocurrency. Like, forget about you 2 innovations behind at this point. You know, and far too many of our industries that we own historically, businesses that we own, we have never innovated. We've never saw the changes in the marketplace and been able to innovate and pivot our businesses, whether it be a pandemic, for instance. How am I going to pivot my business? You know, there's a lot of clothing providers out there that pivoted during the pandemic to make masks. You know, PPE.
Actually, I know someone, PPE protection. But I know actually someone that was doing alcohol, and they have a manufacturer there, a distillery, and they were producing a lot of vodka, right? But not only for them because they have their own brand, but they were also distilling for other companies as well. And during the time of the pandemic, the government came to them and was like, "Hey, listen, we need you to manufacture as much hand sanitizer because you have the facility to do it."
Absolutely.
And they pivot and they turn around and started doing hand sanitizers, and they were cutting checks, and they were doing very well with it. right? Because not only was the government providing that because, for safety reasons, because of what was happening, it was uncertainties, but also that not only that she gained profit, but she gained a relationship and she was able to pivot. But she transitioned back ultimately to selling alcohol. But at that point, to your point, is that sometimes we have to pivot and go a different direction until things stabilize, or maybe it may not stabilize, but at least you have a different foundation that you can go back and forth with.
It's you're bringing up I'm a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program.
I read that as well.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the best experiences that I've had as a professional. Forget about it as an entrepreneur, as a professional. The program always talks about your growth, what your growth strategy is, right? Mm-hmm. And that's actually what pivoted us to being not just a marketing agency, but a growth agency. We only work with companies that are looking to grow, and in some sector or in your entire business. Mm-hmm. Again, remember we talked about market share. If you're looking to maintain market share, I can't help you. I just can't.
Right.
I'm not good at maintaining. It's like, for instance, it actually takes a very strong skill set to maintain a stronger skill set to maintain market share than it is to increase or decrease. It's like, for instance, if I told you to stay at the same weight, you know how hard that is?
It's literally impossible.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
You're either going to gain or you're going to lose.
Yeah.
You
got to have this sick discipline.
You have to have amazing discipline to stay at the same weight, right? So, for us, as a quote unquote pivoting to a growth agency, especially during the pandemic, we had to find out what is important to people who grow. And that's when I went back to my days at Goldman Sachs and said, what were the tenets? What were the things that they focused on? And Goldman Sachs is, one of the biggest
top
banks
tier.
In the world. And it was about focusing on two things: revenue and employees. I can teach you everything else, right? But you scale, you grow at a rapid pace by growing your revenue and increasing the number of employees. A lot of people focus on, how can I tweak my profit margins? Yes, you can focus on that, but you can't tweak your profit margins if you're not growing in revenue.
True. That's 1,000.
If you have the same revenue, you can, tinker. But while you're tinkering, remember, you can't maintain that same, revenue. You're just going to retract on yourself and go the opposite way.
Sustainability only lasts if you're able to, even if you stay at that same cash flow, within the same cash flow or the same profit margins, sustainability will only last you for so long because other things may occur.
Yes.
Other responsibilities, outside factors.
Yep.
So that's why it's imperative that you grow your business, because at some point, even if you're maintaining, you can only sustain for that basic functionalities that you have. But then when other things come in play, you need funding for that as well.
Yeah.
So of other projects as well. So I think that you're absolutely right. One last thing I want to touch on, because I know you were part of the Brooklyn Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah, Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. You were part of the board, right?
Yeah, I sit on the board.
Yeah. How was that like? That experience?
It's been interesting. So we first became... I didn't know anything about a Chamber of Commerce, to be honest with you. And we came to them through our relationship. We were actually looking for health insurance.
For the company?
For the company. And at the time, and again, it's funny because everything is in historical context, right? This is before the age of Obama. So before Obamacare, right? We had these things in New York City or New York State called marketplaces. Right? And they offered a marketplace where companies or groups of organizations could come together and compete to get cheaper health insurance.
Interesting.
So they had this thing called Brooklyn HealthWorks, where the small businesses that were in this group would negotiate. There would be a negotiator who would go to New York State and get New York State health insurance at a reduced price. So I would get hit up by these brokers. Hey, I can offer you. I said, this is how much I'm paying. All right, thanks for your time. I'll talk to you later. Because I mean, we had the cheapest, and it was through GHI. Great insurance.
Wow.
You know, and look, I am a huge supporter of Obamacare. It killed the marketplace. It decimated the marketplace. It was a hack. It was a hack for small businesses. They took the marketplace and made it basically global across the country, providing health insurance not only for business owners, but anyone, you know, at a negotiated rate with these health insurance providers. The problem is the health insurance providers said, well, if I am forced to now have to, you know, compete with other providers for your business, I am going to provide a much more vanilla version of my services, so that I can maximize my profit. They're in business together, you know, as well. And that's where, you know, a lot of things like where I would be able to tweak a drug card and say, hey, I want to, you know, if I'm not really that old and I don't have pharmaceuticals that I need to go to the pharmacy I don't need a drug card, but I want to pay a lower copay. And I don't go to the hospital, so I don't, you know, maybe my coinsurance is a little bit higher. You know, I could tweak all that. Now they just give you here's what it is.
Right.
Here's what it is. And that's a result of Obamacare. Anyway, that's how I came to the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. And more specifically, the MWBE committee, which is the Minority and Women Business Enterprise Committee. It's a certification program that they have here in the city and state. They have a federal program called the 8A program as well, as well as like disadvantaged business enterprises. Really helpful for specific industries, because what it does is with the certification, a lot of organizations, federal, state, as well as city organizations are required to have a certain percentage of the subcontract or of a contract go to minorities or women business enterprise. Historically, unfortunately, those have been white women because minorities don't know about it. And those that do know about it complain about them not being able to access that. Man, you got to get your stuff together.
Right.
You know, you don't have a P&L. You don't know what a balance sheet is. You know, just providing your financials. You know, you should have all of that stuff ready, and have a strategy. It's not just about here's my paperwork. You know, let's run. You know, it's like one of my favorite shows is The Wire. I have two favorite shows. Obviously, Breaking Bad, and the all-time favorite show, and The Wire, depending on you know, day of the week. But you know, in The Wire, they talk about like, you know, how you can't run your business like a drug operation.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You got to be ready to run with the big boys you got to have your paperwork in order.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, if you're going to be a legitimate business. And far too often, you know, a lot of these, you know, entrepreneurs, look, being an entrepreneur is about hiding a lot of stuff, hiding the imperfections and all the things that, you know, you don't want people to see. Right. And project an image, you know, whether it's through your website or your marketing, that is the best version of yourself.
Right.
But when you go into the federal government wants to see all that. You know, how much money is in your bank, you know, your bank account, what does your balance sheet look like? You know, who are you?
Right. In essence, who are you? Right.
You know, and so that's where those programs have fallen short. A lot of it goes to construction organizations, you know, construction companies, because of the capital investment involved in construction, right? But like, for instance, when I first started with the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, we got a bunch of Black-owned barbers, you know, Black barbershops, MWB certified. And I told them why. They were like, why would we get, it doesn't make sense to get barbershops certified. I said, why not? I said, it doesn't matter if they get certified. So one of the things that they did is almost every Black barbershop is closed on Monday, right?
Right.
I don't know why. It's just the way it is. They close on Monday. Yeah. I guess because nobody wants to get a cut on Monday.
On Monday, yeah.
If you were going to get a cut, you was getting fresh for the weekend, right?
That's a good point.
Monday is too far from the weekend, so let's close on Monday, right? Yeah.
And that's probably like the best day when you think about it, right?
So we approached these barbershops and said, well, since you guys are closed on Monday, why don't we get you a contract cutting hair at nursing homes? And, you know, this series, I think it was 16 barbershops across the state, a $200,000 contract to cut these old folks home, in an old folks home, cutting hair. And it wasn't about parts and, you know, fades or nothing like that, just making sure that their hair was cut. I mean, the sustainability of that. I have a 5-year contract cutting these old folks' hair. They ain't gonna even last 5 years, most of these folks. Yeah. But I still have this contract that provides me the stability in my business that I can hire a new barber, maybe even expand into a new location.
That's so true.
You know, and these are programs that are out there.
But we're not tapping.
We don't take advantage of it. Yeah. So that's where the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, you know, and it's funny because over the years I've said to myself, and I think this was 2012 when we first became members of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. And I've tried to audit how much business has come down that pike. It's never been direct. It's been about the relationships that I've developed as a result of my, you know, being not only on the board, but also being connected with the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. You know, for instance, I've worked directly, work with Aviator Sports and Event Center, which is out in Floyd Bennett Field, as a direct result of, you know, I had a client, and I can't mention their name, but representing an industry that historically was not good to our people, and they were trying to sort of change that image and that messaging. And we really focused on sort of how they were branded, and how they came back and approached, you know, our community. But it's been about 3 main facets. And I'll leave it at this: is 3 main facets, right? It's about alignment, enablement, and measurement. Right? And it's aligning your goals with your ability to achieve them. Right? Enabling the technology and tools that you need to actually reach your goals, and the effectiveness to be able to measure them. You know,
that last piece is the measuring part is
very, very important, because a lot of people spend a lot of time activating, you know, in the hamster wheel, and they never take stock to look at, you know, whether or not something worked or didn't work. We had a client, St. Joseph's College, matter of fact, that was spending a lot of, if you know, historically schools spend a lot of money. We've done very well with schools. We're spending a lot of money at the time before the pandemic in what the ads before movies started, right? So, you know, like when you sit in a movie theater, you see the ads up. Right. So because they had no way to measure, they knew that they were getting a lot of students, but they didn't know where that was coming from. They might put it on the application, but who the heck is filling that out?
Yeah.
You know, I found out about you, whatever the thing is, the first box, whatever the first box is, right? But what they realized was all of the money that they were spending, they got zero return. And we, you know, I won't get into the mechanism of how we started to measure that, but we showed them that they could cut out that entire budget line and reallocate somewhere else.
So you found a better process for them.
Yeah.
Especially in this way, you can measure it properly. It
has to be measured and all measured against your goals.
Yeah. And that's one thing. I got a friend, T. He always says this. He says, listen, we got to look at what success look like. And then once we realize what success look like, then we can dice into it and say, all right, this is working, this is not working.
How do you define success?
How do you define this? Success is another key point too. But knowing what success looks like makes it a lot easier for you to see if you're reaching your goals or not.
Yep.
All right, man. This spin's great, brother. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Salud. Man. Appreciate it.
We're going to do it again. So please let people know where they can reach you and social media or any contact information where your website.
Sure. Our website is hybridmedia.com. And it's actually, well, hybridmedia or hybrid.com. Both, you'll find us at both places. Is HIGHBRID.com or at Hybrid Media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Me personally, I'm at Ski Stylist. That actually was my DJ name when I was in high school.
Yeah. You still got skills?
Not really. Not really. I'll be honest about that. I have some, you know, but it was my DJ name in high school and college. Reason being is because Juan Perez is such a common name.
Yeah.
It's like impossible to get a handle on any platform. So I said, well, I got to brand myself a little bit differently. So that's Ski Stylist, which is SKEESTYLUS on almost any platform, including Pinterest. So
good talk, brother. My man.
Yeah, a really good conversation. Like I said, I didn't think we would go in that direction as far as some of this stuff, like especially hip hop stuff.
Deep, yeah, bro. That was deep, bro.
Yeah, it was good combo.